The sleek research vessel, Harmonious Discovery, drifted silently through the dark space of the Centauri sector. Its white hulls gleamed under soft blue lights as various alien species went about their work. Among them walked Dr. Sarah Chen, the only human aboard, her dark hair tied back in a practical ponytail and her Earth Union badge standing out against her white science uniform. Sarah loved her job as the first human xenobiologist on a galactic council vessel, even if most of her alien colleagues kept their distance. Humans were still new to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 15 years ago. Many species still viewed them with suspicion, considering humans too young and unpredictable to be trusted. At her research station, Sarah reviewed the latest sensor data from their current mission. The ship had been tracking unusual energy signatures in this sector for the past week. According to the ship's captain, a tall, blue-skinned Andromedan named X-Trill, these readings matched historical records of the galaxy's most feared species, the Noxthera. Dr. Chen. X-Trill's voice came through the ship's comm system. Please report to the observation deck immediately. Sarah's heart raced as she made her way through the corridors. The observation deck was rarely used except for significant discoveries. When she arrived, she found several senior scientists huddled around the main viewport, their various appendages trembling slightly. Look, X-Trill pointed with one of his 4 arms at the darkness of space. There. At first, Sarah saw nothing. Then, a shadow seemed to move against the backdrop of stars. It was massive, easily the size of a small shuttle. Its dark scales absorbed light rather than reflected it, making it hard to track with the naked eye. More shapes appeared, moving with impossible grace for their size. The Shadow Hunters, whispered Dr. Vrax, an insectoid scientist. We must leave immediately. They are death itself. Sarah stepped closer to the viewport, ignoring the worried clicks and whistles from her colleagues. The creatures moved in perfect formation, their movements suggesting intelligence rather than just predatory instinct. They're hunting as a group, she said, pulling out her datapad. Look at their pattern. It's too precise to be random. Dr. Chen. X-Trill's voice carried a warning tone. The Noxthera have destroyed entire battle fleets. They are mindless killers who have dominated this sector for millennia. We cannot risk. With respect, Captain. Sarah interrupted, her eyes still fixed on the magnificent creatures. Nothing in nature is mindless. These beings are coordinating their movements. That suggests higher intelligence. A loud alarm suddenly blared through the ship. Energy spike detected, announced the ship's eye. Unknown object approaching at high speed. The observation deck erupted in panic as a wounded Noxthera youth tumbled through space near their ship. It had clearly been injured, probably separated from its pack during their hunt. Its movements were erratic and strange. Bioluminescent blood trailed behind it. While the other scientists backed away, Sarah pressed her hand against the viewport. The young Noxthera's eyes, all 6 of them, locked onto her. Instead of the mindless killer she had been warned about, she saw pain and fear in those eyes. They glowed with an inner intelligence that took her breath away. Captain. Sarah turned to X-Trill, her voice firm. Request permission to help that creature. The entire deck fell silent. X-Trill's 4 arms waved in agitation. You cannot be serious. The Noxthera is injured and young. Sarah finished. And everything we think we know about them comes from fear and assumption. This is our chance to learn the truth. As if understanding her words, the wounded Noxthera pressed closer to the ship, its massive form casting a shadow over the observation deck. In that moment, Sarah Chen made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. She chose to trust her instincts over centuries of prejudice. The first contact between humanity and the galaxy's most feared predators was about to begin. The medical bay of the Harmonious Discovery had never held a patient quite like this before. The young Noxthera barely fit in the largest containment chamber, its dark scales reflecting the bright medical lights. Sarah Chen stood before the energy barrier, ignoring the frightened whispers of the medical staff behind her. "This is against every safety protocol," Captain Extrill said, his blue skin now pale with worry. "If that creature breaks free, it could kill everyone aboard." Sarah checked her medical scanner again. "The injury isn't healing properly. Its blood chemistry is unique. Our standard treatments won't work." She turned to face the captain. "I need to go inside the chamber." "Absolutely not." Extrill's forearms moved in sharp, agitated gestures. "I forbid it." The wounded Nox Thera made a low sound, something between a growl and a whimper. Its 6 eyes tracked Sarah's movements, showing none of the mindless aggression the stories had warned about. Instead, there was intelligence there, and something else: curiosity. Sarah took a deep breath. "Captain, with respect, I'm invoking Article 7 of the Earth Union Science Charter. In matters of xenobiological discovery, the senior xenobiologist has final authority." The medical bay fell silent. Sarah didn't wait for a response. She typed in her override code, and the energy barrier formed a small doorway. As she stepped through, she heard several crew members gasp. "Hello there," she said softly, approaching the creature with slow, careful movements. "I'm going to help you. My name is Sarah." The young Nox Thera tilted its massive head. Up close, Sarah could see patterns in its scales she hadn't noticed before, swirls and marks that looked almost like writing. The creature made another sound, this time a series of clicks and low rumbles. Sarah took out her medical tools. "I'm going to treat your wound now. This might sting a little." She reached out toward the injured area on its side. Quick as lightning, one of the Nox Thera's tentacle-like appendages wrapped around her arm. The medical staff cried out in alarm. But the grip wasn't crushing. It was gentle, curious. The creature pulled her hand closer to its injury, as if showing her exactly where it hurt. "You understand," Sarah whispered, amazement in her voice. "You're not just intelligent. You're trying to communicate." Over the next few hours, Sarah worked to heal the creature's wound. She discovered that Nox Thera biology was far more complex than anyone had suspected. Their scales weren't just armor. They contained complex neural patterns, almost like a second brain. The young Nox Thera, whom Sarah started calling Carax based on one of its repeated sounds, proved to be an excellent patient. It watched her work with obvious interest, sometimes making suggestions through gestures about which treatments felt better. "Look at this," Sarah called to the observing scientists. "These patterns change when Carax communicates. It's not just sound. They use their scales to share information. We've been studying them wrong all along." As if to demonstrate, Carax's scales rippled with bioluminescent patterns. The display was beautiful, like watching the northern lights dance across a night sky. Captain Extrill moved closer to the barrier, his scientific curiosity finally overcoming his fear. "In all our records, no one has ever reported this behavior." "Because everyone was too afraid to look closely," Sarah replied, gently running her scanner over Carax's healing wound. "We let fear blind us to the truth." Carax made a purring sound and carefully curled one of its appendages around Sarah's shoulders in what seemed like a gesture of gratitude. The medical staff watched in amazement as the galaxy's most feared predator treated a human with gentle affection. Sarah smiled, knowing she had just proven centuries of prejudice wrong. But as she studied the complex patterns flowing across Carax's scales, she realized this was just the beginning. The Nox Thera had so much more to teach them, if only the galaxy was ready to learn. 3 days after treating Carax's wound, Sarah found herself in a situation no human had ever experienced before. She stood in the ship's largest cargo bay, which had been converted into a temporary habitat for their unusual guest. Carax moved around the space with surprising grace for such a large creature, using its tentacle-like appendages to demonstrate what appeared to be a hunting dance. "Fascinating," Sarah muttered, recording everything with her datapad. "The movements aren't random. They're telling a story." Through their growing bond, Sarah had learned that the Nox Thera's fearsome reputation came from a massive misunderstanding. They weren't mindless killers. They were guardians. Carax's scales flickered with patterns that Sarah was slowly learning to read, showing images of their home system and the delicate balance they maintained. "You're not just hunting," Sarah said suddenly, the realization hitting her. "You're protecting the ecosystem, like rangers in a wildlife preserve." Carax's scales pulsed with approval, creating a beautiful display of blue and silver lights. The young Noxthera had proved to be an eager teacher, seemingly just as curious about humans as Sarah was about its species. The cargo bay door opened, and Captain Extrill entered with several council observers who had arrived to investigate reports of Sarah's unusual breakthrough. Their expressions showed a mixture of fear and disbelief as they watched Carax gently pick up a piece of equipment to show Sarah how they used similar tools in their own society. "Impossible," one of the observers, a tall crystalline being, whispered. "Our records show them as destroyers of worlds, not preservers." Sarah turned to face them. "Those records are wrong. The Noxthera only attacked when their territory was threatened. Look at this." She projected her latest findings onto the cargo bay wall. Their hunting patterns exactly matched the migration routes of invasive species that could destroy entire ecosystems. They're not terrorizing the sector, they're maintaining it. Carax moved closer to the group, causing several observers to step back in alarm. But instead of attacking, the young Noxthera began a complex display of scale patterns. Sarah's eyes widened as she translated. "They're showing us their history," she explained. "Thousands of years ago, their sector faced a devastating invasion of parasitic creatures that consumed everything in their path. The Noxthera were the only ones strong enough to stop them. They've been guarding against their return ever since." The observers watched in stunned silence as Carax's scales painted pictures of ancient battles and long vigils. The story told not of mindless violence, but of sacrifice and duty. "But why maintain such a frightening reputation?" Captain Extrill asked, his scientific curiosity finally overcoming his fear. Sarah smiled as Carax's patterns showed her the answer. "To stay ready. If everyone feared them, they would stay strong, always prepared for the day those parasites might return. They chose to be feared rather than let the galaxy grow complacent." Carax gestured to Sarah, then to the stars visible through the cargo bay window. The meaning was clear. There were more secrets to share, more truths to uncover. A small alarm chimed on Sarah's datapad. "It's time," she said, excitement in her voice. "Carax's family is approaching. They're coming to take him home." The observers shifted nervously, but Sarah stood tall. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Through her friendship with Carax, humanity had gained not just knowledge, but potential allies. The Noxthera were no longer the galaxy's most feared predators. They were its misunderstood protectors, and Sarah Chen was about to become the first human to visit their homeworld. The real adventure was just beginning. The Noxthera homeworld loomed before the harmonious discovery, a planet of swirling purples and deep blues. Sarah Chen stood at the bridge, her heart racing with excitement. She would be the first human to set foot on this mysterious world, thanks to her unique friendship with Carax. "Are you certain about this?" Captain Extrill asked, his forearms fidgeting with worry. "The Galactic Council is very concerned about this level of interaction with the Noxthera." Sarah checked her environmental suit one last time. "The Council has been wrong about them for centuries, Captain. It's time we learned the truth." Carax waited in the shuttle bay, its massive form now a comforting presence rather than a source of fear. The young Noxthera had grown stronger over the past week, and its scales shimmered with excitement at bringing its human friend home. As they descended to the planet's surface, Sarah gasped at the sight before her. Massive crystalline structures rose from the ground like ancient trees, their surfaces alive with the same bioluminescent patterns that Carax used to communicate. Dozens of Noxthera moved among these structures, their scales creating a dancing light, show that Sarah now recognized as their primary language. "It's beautiful," Sarah whispered. Carax's scales pulsed with pride. A larger Noxthera approached them. Carax's parent, Sarah, realized. Instead of the aggression she had been warned about, the elder creature's scales displayed patterns of welcome and curiosity. Carax had apparently shared stories about the human who had helped them. Through their combined scale language and gestures, the Noxthera revealed more about their society. They were not just hunters, but artists, scientists, and historians. The crystalline structures were actually vast libraries, storing their people's knowledge in patterns of light and color. "Look at this," Sarah said into her recorder. "They've been studying us too. They knew humans would eventually reach their sector, and they've been preparing for peaceful contact." The elder Noxthera led them to a massive chamber deep within one of the crystal structures. Its walls came alive with moving images, showing the history of their species. Sarah watched in amazement as they revealed their true purpose. They were the appointed guardians of this sector of space, chosen by an ancient civilization to protect against a threat that still lurked in the darkness between stars. "You've been protecting us all along," Sarah realized, "even when we feared you, even when we tried to drive you away." Carax moved closer, its scales showing images of humans and Noxthera working together. The message was clear. They saw humanity as potential allies, not enemies or prey. Suddenly, alarms began blaring from Sarah's communicator. "Dr. Chen," Captain Extrill's voice crackled through. "The Galactic Council is demanding your immediate return. They're threatening sanctions against Earth if we continue this unauthorized contact." Sarah looked at Carax and its family, then at the history displayed around her. The Noxthera had sacrificed everything to protect the galaxy, accepting fear and hatred to maintain their vigil. Now they were reaching out, offering humanity a chance to understand and help. "Tell the Council," Sarah replied firmly, "that they need to send diplomatic representatives immediately. The Noxthera aren't our enemies. They're our greatest potential allies, and they've been waiting for us to be ready." Carax's scales rippled with approval, creating a pattern Sarah now recognized as hope. Together, they had bridged a gap thought impossible to cross. Now they faced an even greater challenge, convincing the galaxy that its most feared predators were actually its greatest protectors. As the crystal chambers filled with the combined light of dozens of Noxthera sharing their knowledge, Sarah knew that this was just the beginning of a partnership that would change the galaxy forever. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Council was in chaos. Representatives from a dozen species argued loudly as holographic displays showed the destruction of an outer colony world. Sarah Chen stood beside Carax, watching the scenes of devastation with growing horror. 3 colonies lost in the past week, the Andromedan representative announced, his blue skin pale with fear. "No survivors, no witnesses. Something is consuming entire worlds." Carax's scales flashed with urgent patterns. Sarah translated for the Council, her voice steady despite her fear. "The ancient enemy has returned, the one the Noxthera have been preparing for all these centuries." Security footage from the last attacked colony played on the main screen. Strange, shadow-like creatures moved across the surface, breaking down all matter into basic elements and absorbing them. They looked like living darkness, consuming everything in their path. "The Void Plague," Sarah continued, reading Carax's patterns, "a species that exists only to consume and grow. The Noxthera fought them back thousands of years ago, but they knew they would return. And we've been treating our defenders as monsters," Captain Extrill said quietly, his 4 arms crossed in shame. Carax moved to the center of the chamber, its massive form now commanding respect instead of fear. Its scales displayed images of ancient battles, showing how the Noxthera had sacrificed much to drive back the Void Plague, but they had never managed to completely destroy it. That's why they maintained their fearsome reputation, Sarah explained. They needed to stay strong, to be ready for this moment. They've been preparing weapons, strategies, and defenses while we've been trying to avoid them. Another emergency signal flashed on the screens. A 4th colony was under attack. The Council erupted into panic again, But Sarah noticed something different in Carax's patterns. "Wait," she called out. "The Noxthera have been tracking the Void Plague's movement patterns. They're not random attacks. They're following a specific path. The plague is heading toward Earth." Carax's parent completed her sentence using its scales, having learned enough human language to communicate basic concepts. The chamber fell silent. Sarah felt her blood run cold. "They're targeting Earth because of our connection to the Noxthera. They recognize humanity as a potential threat to their invasion." The Galactic Council representatives began arguing about evacuation plans and defensive strategies, but Carax and Sarah shared a knowing look. There was no running from this enemy. The Void Plague would never stop until it had consumed everything. "We have one advantage," Sarah announced, drawing everyone's attention. "Something the Void Plague doesn't expect. For the first time in history, they'll face the combined strength of humanity and the Noxthera." Carax's scales rippled with agreement, showing images of human ships and Noxthera hunters working together. The plague had evolved since their last battle. But so had their defenders. Human creativity combined with Noxthera power might be exactly what was needed to end this threat forever. "The Earth Union fleet can be ready in 3 days," Sarah said, already sending messages to her superiors. "The Noxthera know how to fight this enemy. They just need allies brave enough to stand with them." As the council chambers erupted with renewed purpose, Sarah looked at Carax. Their unlikely friendship had done more than bridge an ancient gap. It had prepared 2 species for the fight of their lives. The galaxy's most feared predators would fight alongside humanity to save everything they held dear. The real war was about to begin. The space above Earth shimmered with the combined might of 2 species that no one ever expected to fight side by side. Human battleships, sleek and angular, moved in perfect formation with the organic shapes of Noxthera hunters. On the bridge of the Earth flagship, Defiant, Sarah Chen stood beside Carax, both watching as the void between stars began to darken unnaturally. "They're coming," Sarah announced to the combined fleet. The Void Plague emerged from hyperspace like living shadows, their forms rippling with hungry darkness. Behind them floated the broken husks of consumed worlds, grim trophies of their advance across the galaxy. Carax's scales flashed with tactical information, which Sarah quickly relayed. "Remember your training. The plague can't consume energy weapons modified with Noxthera biosignatures. Time your shots with their hunting strikes." The battle erupted in a display of lights and shadow. Human ships fired precision energy beams, guided by Noxthera hunters who used their natural abilities to herd the plague into kill zones. It was a dance of death and survival, with 2 unlikely allies moving as one. "Squadron 3, follow Carax's lead," Sarah ordered as she coordinated from the command center. "Their hunting patterns aren't random. They're creating weak points in the plague's defenses." The Void Plague fought back with terrifying force, attempting to separate the human ships from their Noxthera allies. But where the plague expected fear and discord between the species, they found only trust and coordination. "They're adapting to our tactics," warned Admiral Chen, Sarah's father, who had volunteered to lead the Earth fleet. "The plague is learning faster than our simulations predicted." Carax's scales pulsed with urgent patterns. Sarah's eyes widened as she understood. "All ships, fall back to secondary positions. The Noxthera are about to show us why they were feared for so long." The human fleet retreated in perfect order, and the Noxthera moved forward as one. Their scales began to pulse with increasing intensity, creating a web of bioluminescent energy that connected them all. It was their species' greatest defensive ability, one they had hidden for millennia. "Now," Sarah shouted, "all ships, fire through the energy web." Human weapons fire passed through the Noxthera energy matrix, becoming enhanced by ancient defensive powers that the plague had forgotten. The combined attack tore through the shadow creatures, their forms dissipating like smoke in strong wind. But the plague had one final surprise. A massive void entity, larger than any they'd seen, emerged from the darkness. It was the core intelligence, the heart of the consuming swarm. Everyone, protect the Nox Thera while they maintain the energy web, Sarah commanded. We'll only get one shot at their leader. Carax turned to Sarah, its scales showing a pattern she had never seen before. The meaning was clear. They needed one more unprecedented alliance. A human mind linked with Nox Thera power might be enough to guide their final strike. Dad, I need manual control of the main cannon, Sarah said, placing her hand on Carax's scales. Energy flowed between them as human intuition merged with Nox Thera hunting precision. Together, they aimed the combined might of two civilizations at the heart of humanity's greatest threat. The Void Plague leader reached out with tendrils of darkness, trying to break their connection. But the bond between Sarah and Carax, between humanity and the Nox Thera, had been forged through understanding and trust. It could not be broken by fear or force. The final shot blazed across space like a newborn star, carrying with it the hopes of two species fighting as one. As it struck its target, Sarah and Carax watched together, their unlikely friendship having paved the way for the galaxy's salvation. 1 month after the battle for Earth, the Great Hall of the Galactic Council looked very different. Where once the Nox Thera were forbidden to enter, now they stood as honored allies. Their scales created dancing patterns of light across the crystal walls as Sarah Chen addressed the assembled representatives of 100 worlds. The Void Plague is gone, she announced, standing proudly beside Carax. The combined power of human determination and Nox Thera strength has eliminated a threat that has haunted our galaxy for millennia. The council chamber erupted in applause and various alien expressions of joy. Even the most skeptical species now looked at the Nox Thera with respect instead of fear. The fearsome predators had proven themselves to be the galaxy's greatest protectors. In recognition of this historic alliance, the council president declared, "We propose the creation of a new joint defense force. The Human Nox Thera Coalition will stand ready to protect all worlds from future threats." Carax's scales shimmered with approval as Sarah translated the proposal. The young Nox Thera had grown into a respected leader among its people, just as Sarah had become humanity's primary ambassador to their new allies. The Coalition's first project, Sarah continued, will be the establishment of joint training facilities. Human creativity combined with Nox Thera hunting skills has proven to be an unbeatable combination. Footage played on the chamber screen showing human cadets learning to read Nox Thera scale patterns, while young Nox Thera practiced coordinating with human technology. What had begun as one unlikely friendship had blossomed into a full cultural exchange. Captain X Trill, now Admiral of the reformed Galactic Fleet, stepped forward. "We must acknowledge our past mistakes. For centuries, we let fear blind us to the truth about the Nox Thera. It took human courage and compassion to show us what we refused to see." The elder Nox Thera, Carax's parent, moved to the center of the chamber. Its scales displayed images of the ancient past, when they first took up their role as guardians. But now these images were joined by new ones. Humans and Nox Thera working together, protecting the galaxy side by side. The Void Plague chose Earth as its primary target because it recognized the potential of our alliance, Sarah explained. They saw what we're only now beginning to understand. That together, we're stronger than anyone imagined possible. Carax touched one of its tentacle-like appendages to Sarah's shoulder, their long-time gesture of friendship. Its scales showed their first meeting in the medical bay, then flashed forward through their shared adventures. The message was clear. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from seeing past fear to the truth beneath. As we move forward, Sarah concluded, let this alliance remind us all that understanding is stronger than fear and friendship can bridge any gap. The Nox Thera chose to be feared so they could protect us. Now it's our turn to stand with them, not in fear, but in partnership. The council session ended with the signing of the Coalition Treaty. As the various representatives mingled, many approached the Nox Thera with questions and offers of cooperation. Centuries of isolation were ending, replaced by a new era of collaboration. Sarah looked at Krax, remembering that first moment when she chose to trust instead of fear. "Ready for our next adventure?" she asked with a smile. Krax's scales rippled with joy and anticipation. Together, they had changed the galaxy's future. The most feared predators had become the most trusted allies, and a human's choice to show compassion had opened the door to possibilities no one had imagined. As they walked out of the council chamber, Sarah knew this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The stars ahead held new challenges and opportunities, but now the galaxy would face them together, stronger for the unlikely friendship that had shown them the way.